allowed to. It's the internet. There he is. David Rothkopf joins me now. He's been on a tear of writing and podcasting and talking to the smartest people. Who's got better, more reliable sources than you? And you're down there in the DC area. And so how's that all going? Good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you, Pete. I'm just outside of DC. That's where I live. I'm in DC every day because I work there. But I'm glad to be just outside of it because, the troops are moving in. The president's flexing his authoritarian muscle. And, I thought the Mussolini movie was over, but it's coming back.
Yeah.
Here they're making a sequel of a movie that was super unpopular.
So you wrote a really ominous and excellent piece I just shared everywhere and want to talk with you about it. But before I get to the piece, what is the chatter? We talked to our friend Bill B in DC, as we call him. Hopefully one day I'll be able to get a drink or something with both you and him. I'd love to just sit and fly on the wall your conversation. But the inside the Beltway conversation, what does that sound like?
I think it's pretty realistic, which is to say it's pretty grim. Trump has taken in 6 months steps that would have individually been unthinkable at any point in the past 50 years in terms of ignoring the courts or trying to fiddle with elections or corruption. See the New Yorker story. What's he made? $3.4 billion in 6 months, just, turning the White House into a toll booth for his businesses, or marching towards authoritarianism, sending troops in the streets, declaring national emergency on an alien invasion that isn't really happening, taking the sides of war criminals internationally, et cetera. Just take any one of those. It would have blown everybody's mind just a few short months ago. And I think now everybody realizes that we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a new kind of government for the United States. It is an authoritarian government, and yet that's not enough for Trump. He wants to make it a dictatorship. He wants his word to be the only word. He's got an attorney general who says if he says it, it's the law. And it's also just a raging kleptocracy.
Yeah.
We've always, tried to keep our corruption on the down low a little bit here, but it is now out there for all the world to see. And a lot of foreign countries are like, okay, we'll pay up. How long? Yeah, go on.
Not only foreign countries, but American companies and corporations and colleges. I see what I did. And I think that matters because he's extorting money. It's not only, as you're saying, part of doing business, which is classic corruption, which should not be the case, but it's also extortion in a way on these countries, I would argue. Because, if you want to get rid, you don't want to have to pay that tariff. Come on over and bend the needle, daddy, but it's seemingly extortion as well as corruption. Or are they the same?
I think extortion is one of the ways he does business, right? The whole tariff, the tariff thing is extortion, right? Even, NVIDIA wants to go and sell some chips in China. And he's like, okay, well, let's just have a little taste of that for the government. He just uses mobster tactics. He always admired in New York, John Gotti. Trump and John Gotti, who was the, sort of the top mafia boss in the city, they were always very similar, sort of dressed the same way, talked the same way. And Trump acts that way. And he, wants to be a tough guy. And he's a crook, right? I mean, he's been convicted of it. We can say that. I think, people realize that this is where we are now. What they may not realize is that it's getting worse. And one of the reasons it's getting worse is what you just talked about, which is we kind of thought American institutions would make this impossible. We would have the guardrails in the Constitution, balance of powers, courts, Congress. We don't have that anymore. we would have the guardrails of a free press, where the big legacy, press outlets would stand up and report the truth. Well, we don't have it at the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos. We don't have it at the LA Times. We don't have it now at CBS. We don't have it at ABC. We don't have it at X. A lot of the big, and the New York Times is like trying to both sides everything. So we don't have it from the media. And then, as you said, with their corporations, we thought, well, they would stand up, the market would stand up. And one by one, they go cut deals. The universities, they cut deals with him. My alma mater, we've talked about it here, Brown University, Harvard seems to be percolating a deal and so forth. Right. And so, who's standing up to him? And the answer is very fucking few people.
Do you think there's specific malaise around Trump's second term the way there would be if you visited a resort town when you were younger and it was pretty nice, really nice, and then you visited it again, it was really bad? Like you remember something as, oh, it was nice, or it wasn't that bad. He already was the president. And sometimes I wonder if there's this kind of malaise or general feeling to people who lived through Trump 1 and said, it won't be that bad. Yeah, COVID was bad, but that was all over the world. And I'm not going to worry about it the way I worried about it, the way you're all worrying about it. Do you think there's something to that with
maybe, maybe people say, well, look, COVID, a million people died in the United States. It was a big global catastrophe. It was an economic catastrophe. We lived through that. Trump was a terrible president. He was impeached twice. We lived through that. Maybe people are a little inured to all of this, but this Trump is much worse than that Trump. Because he is coming back for revenge, because he's got people all around him who saw how the guardrails, sort of limited what he could do the last time, and they're tearing them down, firing government officials. The Supreme Court between the last time and this time gave him immunity and said, you can, use the Department of Justice however you want. It can be your own personal lawyers. You can, do anything and get away with it. And so he's doing all that. And I think people sort of need to wake up and go, this is not Trump 1.0. The damage this is doing to things like health research, RFK Jr. cutting research for mRNA vaccines, cutting back on the ability of people to get vaccines. And we're just scratching the surface of that. People are dying. People, this is, what happens when after next year, 11 million people get kicked off of Medicaid? What happens as, veterans can't get the care that they want and so forth. And so, this is much, much worse. And it's time for us to wake up and say, it's bad now, but the scars that this is going to leave on America, on American leadership, on our role in the world, that's going to last for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, generations will be screwed because of what's happening right now.
Not me, because I just got my lipid panel and I'm like taking very good health care. Now, I don't know if those numbers have to go through HHS before they get back to me, but.
Well, that means you mean you're healthy.
I'm in control of my health. And so I don't have to worry about, anything.
So if you got hit by a bicycle messenger,
I won't.
And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could just write a check because you got all that big podcast money coming in.
No, I don't have much money, David, but I do have like a lot of awareness, and I won't get hit by a bike messenger. It won't happen.
Did you get COVID? Did you get COVID the last time?
I got it in March of 2023. So at the very end, I bragged about it, and I would always go to audiences everywhere I perform, like, show of hands if you got COVID. And I was at the very end. No, but my jokes are about I guess what I wanted to say is the HHS and RFK Jr. have to be the most impactful long-term so far. There's people say sometimes when something terrible happens, like losing freedoms, hey, it's not the end of the world. But in my mind, death is the end of the world for you or for someone that you love. And Chrissy Noem at DHS is doing terrible things, and of course they're doing terrible things at EPA and everywhere else, at IRS, at the FBI. But it would seem that cutting research into mRNA and doing all of the rest of changing the panel schedule for vaccinations and so much more, that has to be the worst impact we've seen. And it's really, I struggle a lot with the fact that that guy is there.
I understand what you're saying. And the reality is, there's an impulse. There's an impulse if you're in the media of any sort to say, well, what's the worst thing that's going on? And I would say resist the impulse, because there's a lot of bad things that are going on. And it's a mistake to say one is the worst. What's going on in healthcare? Tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people will die. Many will suffer. Furthermore, by ending a lot of this research, you can't just pick it up again. But some of this research takes many, many years. You can't just make researchers appear out of thin air. Many of them are going to leave the country.
Right.
You can't just reclaim U.S. leadership in these areas when we're ceding it to other countries. That's a long-term problem. There are other long-term effects, though, if you mention it. When EPA says, climate change isn't man-made, and the grounds for a lot of these suits won't stand, and we're going to pull back all the regulations, and they destroy, our natural resources, and they make it a more dangerous place to live. That's impossible to reclaim in some cases. So that's going to be around for a while. When you say, we're not going to let people come study in America, or we're going to kick people out who don't like Trump, people are going to stop going to our universities, which is one of our biggest exports. They're not coming back the day after Trump leaves, because they don't know what's happening next. Is J.D. Vance happening next? Is this happening again in 4 years? Our leadership as a country has depended on our intellectual leadership, R&D, other things at these universities. That's gone for decades to come. If you talk about the resource allocation within our country and directing it towards things that are a waste, like ice, or a golden dome that can't possibly ever exist, but is going to produce hundreds of billions of dollars of profit for defense contractors, where could that money have gone? What's the opportunity cost? That's decades and decades. So I would say there are a lot of things that are long-term, costly, and why choose among them? Let's just note that this is going to bring America down. And if I had asked you 6 months or a year ago, is America the richest, most powerful nation in the world? You'd say yes. And I promise you that in 3 years, when that question is asked, you will not say yes.
August 12th is when we're taping. And so in 2028, we will talk, and I will ask you that question. What will the answer be? China?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the Chinese, I don't know, a lot of your listeners, I don't know if they go to China. People are like, China, terrible. Most of them do go to China. Well, they can, by the way. You don't need a visa to go to China. You need a visa to go to the United States. You're going to China for a couple of weeks, get on a plane, go to China. If you want to see what the future of a city looks like, you're not going to see it in America. Get on a plane. Don't just go to Beijing or to Shanghai where you'll see it, or Guangzhou or Shenzhen or Chongqing. Go to any city in China and you will see more advancements. China is about to launch a maglev rail link between Beijing and Shanghai that is going to travel at the speed, a train traveling at the speed of a 737 aircraft.
Wow.
There is so much going on there. Now, there are plenty of problems with China as a country, but in terms of tech leadership, they're moving ahead of us in a lot of measures on AI, on a lot of measures on quantum computing, and they are the world leader in terms of green energy, and we're taking big steps back. So, they're part of it, but the Europeans realize we're doomed. We're not going to be what we were. We're going the way of other sort of fallen empires, and they're going to step up and fill the void. And so are a lot of smaller countries around the world. So it's just the whole geopolitical playing field is going to be radically different because Trump was the president and did so much damage every single day for an entire period of 4 years.
Whatever.
Well, no, it's right, because you could go take a walk in the woods, and that's what most Americans do. And I think, that's the fucking problem. Is most Americans go, I'm pretty comfortable. I can get through this. I'll wait till the next thing happens, and I'll watch, America's Got Talent, and it'll numb my brain for a couple of hours, and they don't care. And that's what the greatest generation. They lived through the Depression, World War II. They sacrificed. They realized that in order to maintain a democracy, you've got to fight for it. In order to maintain an economy, you have to fight for it. And we have come through a period led by boomers like me, led by boomers who were given everything, who stopped recognizing that democracy is not something you inherit. It's something you create every day. It's something you fight for every day. And we're just frittering it away. And that's what happens. That's, the rise and fall of great powers.
I'm glad that I gave that complacent sigh, whatever, because it's exactly what I was hoping how you would react, because I do see so much apathy and so much lack of concern amongst all types of different groups of people.
Can I say one more thing here, though? Because it goes back to your first point about universities and media companies and big businesses.
Yeah.
What we have in this country is a case of institutional rot, corruption in our government and weakness atop these institutions where greed is driving everything, and everything is very short-sighted. So how do you fix that? You don't fix it top down. You fix it bottom up. You fix it by individuals. People are listening to this, saying they're going to go and do something in their town, on their school board, in their community, spreading ideas that they think, using the tools that we've got, which are incredibly powerful, social media and so forth, to drive the change. If you are waiting for an institution or an individual leader to save your ass, it's not going to happen. And so I think everybody who's listening has got to say, what am I doing? How am I taking care of my kids? How am I taking care of my house? How am I taking care of my job? How am I taking care of my community? What am I doing? Not just tweeting or blue skying.
That's all I do.
You do. I know you're being snarky and stuff, but the reality is you build podcasts. You go out there, you talk to people, you motivate people, you try to inform people.
I gave blood.
Well, and all those things matter. And I know you're engaged in like your school board and local things that matter around there. And
I'm not, for me, I've had the same kind of rage and contempt since 2008 against apathy. I tried to create a show based on my work at the Colbert Report and the Daily Show, understanding only that you can talk about news and issues that affect people's lives and make progressive-minded people and average people pay attention because it's entertaining. So I tried to make tax policy and trade policy entertaining. I'm not sure I was very successful. I was successful enough, but the whole goal was just to fight apathy and ignorance. And so for me, it still caused me so much rage to see people not be engaged. And then even if they are engaged, not do anything about it, which is, another step, but still.
Hot flash to everybody. Listen to Pete. Life is not a rehearsal. You lie in your deathbed and you say, oops, I was apathetic. Let me get another shot. You don't get another shot.
I think a lot about the Braveheart speech.
Because Mel Gibson is your hero? Is that what we're getting to here?
It's the one he made when he was drunk to a police officer.
Yeah, because you've been called sugar tits before in your life, is it?
No, there's that one sentence, and it's so awful to quote such a silly film in many ways, but I do think about, I was affected by movies a lot growing up, and they made me think sometimes, but when he talks about, will they fight? Will you fight? You know, years from now, you could be in your bed dying. It's like what you just said. And would you give a chance to go back and win back your freedom? And in this case, I just feel like people aren't losing freedoms, and there's just so,
I don't even fucking get it. You know, in Israel, despite the fact that they have an authoritarian, corrupt, horrible war criminal as their leader, hundreds of thousands of people end up in the street. In Georgia, the country, not the state, hundreds of thousands of people end up in the street. In Budapest, where they have an authority, hundreds of
Ukraine.
Every people get up and they get organized and they do it. And in the United States, we did the fucking laziest thing. Let's be honest about this. This whole thing that we had, where there was this massive national demonstration, we couldn't actually have it all in one place, right? We said, well, let's everybody do one in your city. And so you're in East Buttfuck, Illinois, and there's 37 people on a corner. And you're saying, hey, we had 37 people on a corner. And it's like, oh, yeah, that made a big difference.
Yeah.
It was just the fucking laziest thing. Get on a bus. Go to Washington, D.C.
I definitely was happy I didn't have to go into the city, and there was one on our corner. It was 2000.
Right. And that's because we're all so fucking lazy that we're just sitting there instead of actually doing something.
I fully agree with you. It is, however, a good way to organize. In this case, New York 17. We got a good mailing list as a result of people who lived in the district.
Because that's a district. Great. More power to you. But in terms of national impact, weigh the impact, and it's like all these people. Well, I gotta get home in time to water the garden, and it's like,
don't you think isn't that it? You mentioned all those other countries and the revolutions they have, or the fact that people are in the streets for any number of reasons. In France, the unions shut down, right? They protest, and there's general protests in Europe and other places. But don't you think the answer is most of us are doing fine and are comfortable and aren't that concerned about any number of the things that you and I are losing our brains over for a long time?
That's why Khrushchev said, we will defeat you without firing a shot. That's why throughout the Cold War era, the Russians were like, the Americans are soft. And we were like, we are not soft. And then we're like, we beat you. And it's like they had their internal flaw. But I don't want to jump to conclusions, because things happen over time. And, if communist China ends up being stronger in the end, because our softness allowed us to go through this period, then they were right. And that we are soft and lazy. And people don't remember the nature of sacrifice for their community. And we are so obsessed as a country with the idea of the individual. They'll say, well, I sacrificed for my kids and my family. You don't live alone. You live in a community. And we have gone so far in the direction of crazy capitalism, it's all about individualism, that we've lost something that every other country in the world keeps in mind, which is we are part of a community and we have to sacrifice for the community.
Oh, well, don't get me started. I firmly believe our country has not made a shared sacrifice since World War II. I've argued this and tried to figure this out. Someone, I'm sure, has written an article, if not you, about it. And I think that your point now that you just made about crazy individualism and capitalism is exactly why we're here. And we really don't care about each other unless we know each other, unless I work with one.
Yeah. Well, but that's why, there's we talked about it a couple of visits ago that I've made here with you about Mamdani, and people are like, oh, yeah, well, that's New York and that doesn't make a difference and blah, blah, blah. No, pay attention. It makes a difference. People, young New Yorkers, see excessive wealth and income disparities and power disparities and a rigged system up close and personal every single day. And they say, I don't want any more part of that. They say, I need somebody who has a different thinking about it. And they're saying, I don't want the mainstream Democrat who's going to sit there and triangulate and say something that a consultant says lands them halfway between what a Democrat should be saying and what Trump is saying, because that's what the political winds suggest you might is the smartest. They don't want somebody who's trying to get the right answer. They want somebody who is authentically going to fight back against what they see as a corrupt and unfair system.
Yeah.
And Zoran Mamdani, whatever his flaws, Zoran Mamdani speaks to those people because he seems like he really believes it. And they just want to fucking change. They want a real change. And
it's interesting, the demographics I was looking at, because I was asked to go on a show and talk about New York politics. And I said, yes. And even though there's 100 better people than me, but I read up on just voting demographics, and I thought it was really interesting to learn that a lot of lower income folks and a lot of black and brown folks, especially in the Bronx, didn't vote for him. They voted for Cuomo. And I was like, what's that about? We can talk about that. But more importantly, I thought it was interesting that 20-year-old white kids, including Jewish people in New York, in Manhattan, overwhelmingly apparently voted for him. And I think the reason what you're saying is, like, New Yorkers are figuring this out is because what they're basically saying is, I'm 20 and I have a good job, and this is way too expensive to live here in this little tiny box. This is too expensive. This shouldn't be the case for me in my life right now. And it wasn't for my parents and their generation nearly like this. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also think they say this system doesn't work for me. And I'm not afraid of the world, words like social democrat, or, I'm not afraid of saying I don't like the Democrats and I don't like the Republicans, but I am not going to be apathetic and shrug it off. I'm going to find a different choice. And I got to tell you, every American election is about change, because Americans are fickle and they always, want what's a little bit better. But if neither party mainstream is offering that change, then you have to go in different directions. And the Republican Party wasn't. And they went in the direction of Donald Trump, who was an alternative voice, who actually communicated. The worst human being in American history. But what he communicated to his voters was, I'm not like everybody else. And people believed it viscerally because he wasn't. And
even though he's orange.
Well, and also because he was used. The fact is he's a moron and he's a sucker. And, the big power guys in Silicon Valley and Wall Street and stuff said, yeah, okay, we can use this guy. And when we're done with him, we'll go on to the next thing. And, we'll say, hey, Don, we'll give you a little bit of money here, but get rid of the regulations and get rid of our taxes. And income inequality grows in the US, and they get more and more power, and the 1% get more and more control. And we become less and less democratic as a country. And so people are saying, well, who's that other voice? And I got to tell you, Mamdani, for whatever you can say about him, he is a legitimate other way. He doesn't stop. Like I saw I like Pete Buttigieg a lot, but he offered some comment the other day about Israel and Gaza.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, what's the right answer here?
Right.
I got to say something that's good for the, American Jewish community. I got to say, And it was such a bullshit answer. And I loved Kamala Harris as a candidate, but every time I watched her try and answer a question, I saw her going, what's the right answer? Hillary Clinton, what's the right answer? I'm tired of these. What is the right answer, Democrats? Tell me. Bernie Sanders and AOC, they tell you what they feel, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Trump tells you what they feel. And I think in this period where people are pissed off and want real change, if you don't just speak from the heart, walk the walk, and talk the talk at the same time, you're not credible. You're not authentic. And that's what I think people really need to see. This triangle. I saw there a bunch of Democrats yesterday on TV, and this morning, by the way, on TV, going, oh yeah, well, Trump does have a point. There is crime in DC. And it's like, no, there's not. No, there's not. It's at a 30-year low, and Trump is a criminal. And the biggest criminal act in Washington modern history was led by Trump. And the police he says he's going to help are actually frickin' people that his mob beat up. And then he pardoned those people, and he's stealing money, and he's violating the Constitution. Don't try to split the difference between where you are and pure evil. Just sort of say, it's evil. Stand up against it. We will have no more of that.
It is, I love Passionate Rothkopf. By the way, on the live chat, people watching on YouTube, Tony Sir 80 shout out says, one of my favorite duos. I listen to both of your shows individually daily, but it's extra special when you guys are together. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for watching and listening on behalf of myself and David. I'd ask you this. There is some crime there. Bad things happen in D.C. Just not too long ago, there was a looting, and then there was a beating, and there was a carjacking, and there was a murder. There is crime.
There's crime everywhere on the planet Earth, okay? But it's at a 30-year low. And the way the law works in the United States is the D.C. Home Rule Act says that the president can take over certain functions within D.C. if there is an emergency. Okay, there is no emergency. Okay, we're at a 30-year low in crime, and and key indicators, homicide, and other things are down. So, why is he doing it? We need to ask. Why is he, according to the Washington Post, prepared a military division which will have as its job not defeating a foreign enemy, but being dropped into American cities to put down unrest? Why did he pick an idiot to be the Secretary of Defense? Right? But there was a reason he picked this, booze-soaked frat boy with no leadership experience, because he knew he would say yes every time Trump said, I want to send troops in. Because the last time around, the military leaders said no. And so, why is he sending these troops in? Why is he doing this? Will it be to interfere in elections? Will it be to attack his opponents? Is it because of pure, undiluted racism? Because there was a lot of that in that press conference yesterday. It was sort of the most highly resourced lynch mob in history. And the answer is all those things. It has nothing to do with fighting crime. And anybody who's like, oh yeah, there's some crime, so we should, you should be sympathetic to that. Bullshit. He's a criminal running the most criminal regime in American history. Just say the truth.
And even if it were, and there have been times and in cities where crime was far, far worse in every possible way, and no president invited in the National Guard and the military to crack down on crime this way. And FBI agents, apparently, they're not trained to do that, A, and B, you're taking much needed resources for actual crimes and things that they're prepared to do, like fight wildfires and shit like that. And you're taking away these National Guardsmen that have to leave their families and their jobs. I think it was Adam Kinzinger, who was a National Guardsman, said they're taking them away for your show. I mean,
well, that's right. But what they're doing with the FBI is gutting real crime fighting to do this performative
to fight the homeless.
What they're doing is gutting our national security establishment to actually do this performative things, which makes us weaker, which makes us more vulnerable to crime. But quite apart from all of these things, Mussolini and Hitler said there were social problems and they had to take strong actions in order to end those social problems, or the threat of the Jews or the threat of the communists. Fascism isn't the proper response to social problems. It makes everything worse. And, too many people, including highly paid, nicely coiffed people on television and YouTube and other platforms out there are trying to be reasonable about the unreasonable things that are happening in our country.
It's a good way. It's almost like a good measure of, at this point, how to trust certain commentators. That if they seem like they're being too reasonable, then change the channel. If they're not panicking and losing it and still, like you, able to communicate cogently, effectively, but in such a way, and using words like, the government's launching a lynch mob, like this isn't being hyperbolic, and we're not going to stop talking about it. But at the same time, it sounds like you're saying, when you see people kind of being reasonable about it, I feel like I've always been up there myself when I'm talking about things, but it's necessary at this point, is what you're saying. Before you go, do you have to go?
Well, I can do a couple more minutes here.
I really didn't get to your very important piece at the Daily Beast, which everybody should read. It's real good, and I'm going to quote from it in a second. But I just have to ask you one more specific question, because our little Mad King is meeting with his handler, Vladimir Putin, apparently this week. I don't know if it's in Russia or Alaska. There's some confusion where they're meeting, but I just wanted to
the only person who's confused is him. It's in Alaska. Yeah, go on.
If the government is telling a private corporation, you need to give us 15% of your profits, and this is separate from taxing and regulating a company. If they're also saying we need to get NVIDIA, in this case, we want 15% of your profits, isn't that what communist countries, isn't that what we've always been worried about? And isn't that what Republicans say Democrats are going to do? That the government is going to tell a private company what to do, and you're going to have to pay me a little off the top, and then you can tie it into Trump meeting Putin if you want. Well,
I mean, those are separate things. But what Trump is doing with NVIDIA and trying to get a little bit of a taste, as I said, Gotti-esque in its approach, it's the same thing that he tried to do as he brokered the deal between U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel, where he talked about the golden share that's going to the government. That is centrally planned economy stuff. It's communist stuff. And I think one of the really important things that comes out of this conversation is, let's stop getting hung up in these labels, because when the whole government is working hard to enrich certain people and saying that poor people have to pay taxes, but rich people don't, and poor people have to follow the law, but rich people don't, and we're going to take away regulations on companies so that the very rich will do better and better, that is the state helping out a subset of society. That is the state doing what we accuse communist countries of doing. And when communist countries, have thriving private enterprise, that is something that makes it different. Or, you can't say the word socialist in the United States, but if you look at countries with the best social contracts, with the happiest populations, with the most fiscal responsibility in the world, they're European countries. They are all, one way or another, social democratic models where they have real social safety nets, where they believe that nobody should go bankrupt for healthcare, where nobody should go bankrupt to pay for an education, where nobody should die without dignity as an old person because they don't have a pension and they aren't taken care of. Those countries aren't socialist, they're smart. They're not socialist, they're moral, they're ethical. And we're not. We've lost the narrative. We've lost the understanding of the whole reason we have a government. And, maybe one good thing about having Trump as president is that it's going to drive home that message, and we can make some big changes, because Lord knows we need them.
None of those countries, by the way, that we're talking about likely have the type of wealth and income inequalities that we have had for a generation at least. If not,
we have the worst income inequality of any of the developed countries.
But the gap between the rich and the poor is got to be a measure for the health and happiness of a society. So the U.S. versus Norway or France or even Italy, or
as Justice Brandeis said, almost 100 years ago, you can either have an extremely wealthy, small subset of the population, or you can have a democracy. You can't have both. Right now, we're not fighting to save democracy in America. We're fighting to restore democracy in America because we lost it.
Let me just end on your piece titled at the Daily Beast today, Why Trump's Chilling Flex of Brute Force is So Disturbing. Our president is a wannabe tyrant using techniques favored exclusively by leaders and thugocracies across the world. It's a great piece. We've already touched on this issue a little bit, but you write, we're not only well down the slippery slope into authoritarianism that many warned would happen should Trump be returned to power, we are well on our way to effectively criminalizing being a non-white man in America, and to serially silence all whose views, backgrounds, or lifestyles do not conform to Trump's view of what an American should be. One of the reasons I do love talking to you is because the way that you talk as a white man, as a Jewish man, I as a white man need to have these conversations and need to be making it, if you will, more comfortable or less comfortable if your white male friends, in this case, aren't joining you in the fight against fascism. So say more about that piece and white nationalism, which has arrived. It's here, baby.
Well, it's here. Look at Pete Hegseth, who's like touting that he's part of this evangelical Christian sect, where the leader of the sect, whose views he's just promoted, doesn't think women should have the right to vote, who thinks America should be a Christian nation. Yep. You know, the people who founded this country, and they were deeply flawed people, as we all know, but the people who founded this country were doing so after a couple of hundred years of European history, where Protestants and Catholics were killing each other, and where every time a country went too far in one direction or too far in the other direction, there was bloodshed. And they said, you know something, we need to get religion out of governance. We need to be tolerant, let people do what they want to do in their own homes, but the government can't take a side in this. And we're losing sight of that. And Trump, you know, plays to that. And he also plays to the fact that a lot of people in his base feel afraid. They feel afraid that they're losing their jobs, or they feel afraid that other countries are getting ahead. They feel afraid that they were, you know, that what, as a white male, they were going to have one role in society, and it isn't what they're going to have. And he's playing to those grievances. And that is the basis for what he's doing. And if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, and I ask you to sort of look at any area, you could just spin the wheel and pick the area: immigration policy, the money going to ICE, the crackdown in foreigners in our schools, the cutbacks in providing Medicaid and food stamps and other services to the bottom of the population. The move on the in red states to deny women control over their own bodies. The cultural wrap around all of this for trad wives and the ad that ICE ran last week saying, defend your culture. Okay. All of this is about one thing. It's about Christo-fascism. It's about ethno-nationalism. It's about white male run America, Christian white male run America. And we have a guy who is president who doesn't believe in tolerance, who believes in using the force and the power of the state to impose his will, to impose the will of those around him, like Stephen Miller, on everybody else. It is intolerant, it is un-American, and it's a threat to the way of life of everybody in this country, including plenty of white males, because maybe they don't agree with it. Or maybe they have relatives who will be hurt by this. Or maybe they just have a fucking conscience.
By the way, I just heard about the thing you mentioned, defend your culture, yesterday, but just in case anybody else hasn't heard, Homeland Security, I don't know, they probably did this cross platforms and maybe it was other agencies, but Homeland Security put on Twitter at DHS Gov, so government handle, serve your country, defend your culture, No undergraduate degree required. Join.ice.gov. And when you look at it and when you read it, it sounds very race war-y. It sounds like join the race war. And including black and brown people, please join us to fight against any advantages you might earn in life.
That's what it is. That's why I said it's the best reason.
You're leaning forward. You're leaving.
No. That's why. That's what it is. That's why I think we are, they have a president who stood yesterday with a lynch mob around him, and that's why I think people should not be complacent about what's happening, because it's actually getting worse every day. And anybody who's reading the news knows it's getting worse every day. Anybody who listens to your show knows it's getting worse every day. And turning it back, fighting back against it, is going to get harder and harder with every passing day.
I don't like that last part, but what do you want to say about this meeting with Vladimir Putin? I know you shared Ed Luce's article. I didn't get to read it, but what do we need to know about this meeting?
Look, Trump has been Putin's poodle. Trump is Putin's poodle. People say, oh, he's changing his views and he's frustrated with Putin. Well, that may well be. But here is the reality. We give less money to Ukraine than we did by a lot. We have embraced Russia's view. We are advocating Russia's idea that, Russia should get to keep the land that it has stolen from Ukraine. The president on a daily basis says both sides are responsible for this war when this is not true. He also, by the way, on a daily basis says this war would never have happened had he been president, even though it started in 2014 and it raged throughout his presidency. And we'll see him go there, and he may, say, oh, I'm disappointed with that or whatever. But I don't even think you'll see that. I think what you'll see is we had a good conversation, and I'm going to bring this forward to Zelensky. And then he's going to go to Zelensky and say, look, buddy, you're not going to be in NATO. You're not going to be in the EU. You're not going to be able to have your own military. And Russia gets to keep everything it took. And that's our deal. Take it or leave it. And Zelensky will go, well, I can't take it. And then Trump will go, see, Zelensky is the opponent of all this. And Trump will say, well, I can't solve this problem. I'm going to move on to something else, because by moving on, he leaves the door open for Putin. And it's one of the ways that he can serve Putin. We won't be giving money to Ukraine. Putin will be free to do what he's doing. So I just expect more Trump kowtowing publicly and privately to Putin.
David Rothkopf, you've done it. I cannot thank you enough for giving me your whole 10 a.m. hour here on a Tuesday in August. We're very grateful. Usually I make a pithy joke or remark, but I really do appreciate you joining me. I love reading your work and sharing your work and talking to you and getting the opportunity to ask these questions. And soon I'm going to go and spend actual time with my favorite people, just talking and learning from them, so that I can do my best to keep the wisdom that I get to learn from you alive in me, if it's even 3%.
You do great work. That's why I always love coming back here. I think it's really important. I think your listeners, who I see, in their talking and social media and so forth, are really engaged and are responsive to this kind of conversation. And that's important at a time like this. And I just hope they keep listening to you and what you're doing.
Thank you very much for joining me. I will let you go.
Thanks, Pete.
All right. David Rothkopf, everybody. And go thank him and go follow him and go read him right now, and go subscribe to his Substack, which is so good. DavidRothkopf.substack.com. Need to know. My mom's favorite. Top three guests on the show. Loves you. Loves you. Loves Waj.
And
I forget who her other
maybe you're in the top three also.
I said to Mom, I go, Mom, why don't you prefer more female guests? She goes, I don't know. I feel a little self-conscious about that. You're not wrong. I was like, oh, all right. She's like, maybe it's because you don't book nearly that many. David, thank you. All right, I'm ending the stream. Bye, everybody.